Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now is Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Stephen Lynch. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee and has been in the room for the closed-door depositions throughout this impeachment inquiry. Congressman, thank you very much for being here. I do want to continue talking about timing and whether you plan on getting this done before 2020. There is a lot to do, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to read off what we know so far, and you tell me if we're leaving something out. 11 other witness transcripts have yet to be released. 2 are scheduled to be released tomorrow. I guess they're going to come in pairs for the coming days. There's additional closed-door testimony scheduled. Some witnesses are ignoring that, those subpoenas. Public testimony in the House Intelligence Committee. Judiciary Committee deliberation on potential articles. December ruling on Kupperman on whether or not he has to appear before the committee. Full House vote on potential articles if it comes to that. And then, of course, it goes to the Senate. Do you think that this is going to happen before 2020?
Well, I think there's a range of possibilities, and there are some witnesses out there that are sort of on the bubble. I can think of National Security Advisor Bolton. If he agreed to come forward, I think we would make accommodations for that. But I think that Chairman Schiff has indicated several weeks. That could be a month. It could be a little bit less when we might get to public hearings. But again, the important thing is to have the evidence, to go forward with the best evidence. And I think that's really the priority. I was down there today. We expected 4 witnesses to appear today. None of them did. We've got some witnesses on for tomorrow. I think one of them might attend. And then on Wednesday, we have another witness that might attend. So that's having some bearing on the time frame. Some of it is not readily within our control. We're also looking for documents that we've requested from the State Department. We actually know what the documents say because witnesses have described those documents verbally to us, but we still want to have that chain of custody. We want to have the documents delivered by the witness to the State Department, to the Congress, to effectuate any case that goes forward.
Do you think the administration is trying to stall? And if they are, to what end?
Oh, they're definitely trying to stall. I think, and they're trying to spin, right, as this goes forward. I think they see that, the longer this goes on, sort of like the Mueller report, people kept hearing, dribs and drabs, and then in the end, it sort of fizzled because the report said there was no collusion, although it didn't dismiss the possibility of obstruction. I think the story went on too long. In this case, I think the meaningful part of this will be when we get witnesses on the stand. As was said earlier, we have a line of questioning for 45 minutes. These are very credible witnesses, many of them. Ambassador Taylor, also Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, very, very powerful testimony, and real patriots in my opinion.
Why are the transcripts only being released in pairs, and why did we get McKinley and Yovanovitch today when they were not the first witnesses?
Well, they were among the group of first witnesses, and I think they provide a context, especially Yovanovitch. I think it provides a context to what was going on with former Mayor Giuliani acting on behalf of the president. That whole the context of her threatened removal if she didn't get on board with the program to defend the president's conduct. So I think it's important to lay out the context, and the more I think impactful testimony will come later.
So are you saying you're basically building a case, an argument, by releasing the testimony in a certain order?
I believe so, yeah.
Back in April, you told the Boston Herald, the radio program of the Boston Herald, that impeachment could hurt the Democrats potentially. You said, I think if we were to go through this bruising impeachment process in the House, I think we'd have the votes, but it will go to the Senate and it will die there. I think at that point, if it is seen that the president has been exonerated, then the whole focus of the whole election period will be on impeachment rather than the merits of President Trump being elected, or we go to a new candidate. So I think it could hurt us politically for those reasons. That was back in April. Obviously, that was about the Mueller report. This is a different topic. Do you think it's different now?
I do. The difference is evidence, right? So back then, we had the Mueller report. It was inconclusive, I believe, the way it was rolled out. And we had a response from, I think, every single Republican senator that was not enough to impeach. In this case, we have the president's statement, which is pretty damning in itself. We have a lot of corroborating witnesses. We have people who were on the call. We have direct evidence. We have both testimony and documents. And then we had every single Republican senator support the idea of an impeachment inquiry, which is much different than what we had in the first instance. So,
are you expecting there to be potentially bipartisan support for impeachment, or potentially Republicans who will vote to remove him? Because as of now, the scenario still reads the same, where Republicans vote to keep him in office, and then failed removal could potentially be the number one topic in the 2020 election.
Well, what I'm saying is that the difference here is direct evidence of the president's misconduct, his wrongdoing, his criminal activity. We did not have that before. So you're right. We could prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt to those people who are open to the facts. And yet the Republican Senate could say, you know what? We're not going to defend the Constitution. We're not going to defend the rule of law. We're going to defend the president in his misconduct. That could happen. But I think there would be consequences for those senators if they broke their oath of office and did not support and defend the Constitution.
It is Tuesday, the 5th of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A little bit of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Hey, election day in many parts of the country. We have some elections here in the state of Oregon. A really small one in the county I reside in. Only one bond measure to be voted on for emergency call services and alert services. In the voter pamphlet, there were absolutely no arguments against the measure. None. But it is a tax. And I guess that's all the argument against that you need. So why pay for the publishing when all you have to say, hey, it's a tax, and everybody hates taxes. Except in this instance, it's to upgrade a very antiquated alert system. And I'm pretty sure it will pass. Now, we had reported earlier that Greg Walden, representative here in my district, has decided not to run again for re-election. And his opponent in the last election, Skinner, is actually putting her efforts into securing the Attorney General post. So she's running for that. And we still do not have a declared candidate on the Democratic side here in this 2nd district in Oregon. Hey, we need somebody, and we need him good. Whatever that means. The Republican side has their usual, I don't know, what is the professional term in politics? I think it's called the usual Looney Tunes. have stepped up, and we expect them to declare their candidacy right quick. And we'll see who we get on our side. Trump did win this area by 19 points. 19. So that says something about how liberal Oregon is. Eee. All right. Lots happening in the world and lots happening on the curated part of our show today. In fact, I guess we should just get right on in it. At the top, Democrats are building a case for impeachment by releasing the testimony in order. Well, sort of in order, but they are creating a narrative. They're putting them in order in terms of the narrative storyline. The actual testimonies when they were taken might be out of order. But, it's how you make a movie. You shoot maybe the middle first and then the beginning and then the end, or, you switch it around. So, in terms of the actual story, when things began, we are seeing a build-up. And of course, Trump is denying everything. First it's denying, and then it's, okay, it happened. So what? We're into the so what part. I can do anything I want. I got a second article here. It gives me the right to do anything. And this OLC memo, another OLC memo. Well, those OLC memos apparently aren't faring too well in the courts. Courts are putting it on the public record that, hey, whoever wrote this stuff for the Justice Department has never tested it in court. I suppose you might say there's two rules of justice here in America. One for them and the other for all the rest of us. And there's a lot of us, too. So, regardless, get out and vote. Got to do it. Big story coming out of the UK about Boris Johnson and others hiding a government report, squashing it. A government report about Russian influence in the 2016 elections that brought on Brexit. And he is keeping that on the low. Doesn't want anyone to see it. He'll say, well, we'll do it after this election. Now, I've heard these arguments before. Well, we can't have news about election interference or hacking voting machines because it might cause people to lose faith in voting. You know what makes people lose faith in voting? Finding out that the voting machines can be hacked and are. And outside hostile foreign influences actually manipulating the votes, let alone the influence campaigns that we are all subjected to. And once again, Mitch McConnell himself has squashed another attempt at election security in our upcoming presidential election. They cannot win fairly. They've only been able to win by cheating. From gerrymandering to accepting foreign help from a hostile foreign power. Yes. Well, you can rest assured many of the GOP don't really look at Putin as being hostile. In fact, there's many of them who are going to be jurors in an impeachment trial who have been feted, wined, and dined in Russia on the 4th of July. Which brings up another issue. Trump lambasted the 44 million that live in California, will not help, criticized Gavin Newsom as if he's been governor for the last, 30 years apparently in this guy's mind, putting out this stupid argument that you gotta sweep the forest floors, and any other number of wacko ideas. This guy doesn't know anything about forest management, and these fires are not in the forest. They're caused by the power company and their deferred maintenance. And these are not in the forest. These fires are in the suburbs. So no money will be going to California, but he was on a call yesterday with Vladimir Putin about how the United States can send money and physical help to fight the fires in Russia. Won't help an actual state of the United States, similar to the disdain he holds our international allies. But a hostile foreign power who is on the record to destroy the United States from within, that guy's going to get help. And we have an election coming up, not just today. 2020's coming up. And I keep hearing these terrible stories about, we can't have an impeachment inquiry or a trial going on during an election. Yes, I think the election might be a referendum on it all. And when the American people find out what the hell's going on, we're going to have that toxic third, or a little bit less than that toxic third, are going to make a lot of noise and rattle a lot of drums and shoot off a lot of firepower. But their numbers are small, though they be toxic. When the American people become more and more aware of what this scofflaw has been doing, the idea of impeachment will be a removal from office, but more than likely it will be at the ballot box. And once again, impeachment is not removal from office. Okay, that's something entirely different. Impeachment is the trial. Thank you very much. We still have an election coming up. He's going to get help from those hostile foreign powers. And they know what they're doing this time. But so do we. What's on the rest of the menu? Here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Trump has endorsed the far-right candidate in Virginia's 13th district, where 60% of the voters don't like him. So he's just going to bring his tried and true power of persuasion. The Trump administration overturned Obama-era regulations that limited the amount of toxic waste coal plants can spew into the nation's waterways. If the black guy liked it, Trump doesn't. And Trump's other lawyer, I'm looking at you, Jay Sekulow, now hopes the Supreme Court will keep his taxes hidden. Yeah, let's see. He's got a couple of guys on the Supreme Court right now that might be a big help. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where rights groups argued in a Canadian court that the U.S. is unsafe for asylum seekers and refugees. And the leader of Canada's small Green Party quit to spend more time with her family after winning just 3 seats in that country's national election. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right-ish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity has allowed us to resist for the past 8 years, as Resistance Radio is meant to be, as the founders originally intended, all those many, many decades ago, all the way before the beginning if there is such a concept. Regardless, all kidding aside, the bills just keep increasing. Boy, that the internet provider bill just went up again. How dare you, Spectrum? And but thank you. It doesn't take much to help us out. The cost of a espresso type coffee drink sent our way once a month helps us mitigate those increasing costs. I guess they're variable. We consider them fixed, even though they keep increasing. How is that? All kidding aside, thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, a very integral part of this multimedia operation. The links are there so that you can flesh out the story in its proper form and take into consideration whatever embellishments or dramatic interpretation I have added to it. Indeed. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Hey, I want to give a big shout out to Spreaker. We were having a bit of a problem getting our Netroots Radio team's shows into podcast form and posted as a podcast. And we originate out of Spreaker, and from there goes into the RSPs. It gets picked up by iTunes and everybody else. So we were not able to post over the weekend, and come yesterday morning, we still were not. But we were able to get a hold of them before they close up shop over there in Europe somewhere. I think it's the UK for Spreaker. But they got back to us promptly and fixed the issue. And thank you very much for that. I was expecting, maybe days. Because that's been the experience in some other vendors that we have. I won't say who and what they do, but sometimes the customer service aspect on some of these amorphous entities are very hard to get a hold of. But Spreaker responded almost immediately and fixed the issue. Oh my God. They had a workaround, but before we even got to the workaround, they'd fixed the general problem. And once again, big shout out to Spreaker. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes our way by way of Share Blue Media. And let me scroll down here. Page is loading because I was a little bereft in getting it loaded. Well, Josh Israel brings us this offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, by the way. Oh, well, fair warning, there is corn in this chowder. That's how I make it, and I always will. Donald Trump took a brief break from tweeting about the impeachment inquiry yesterday, Monday morning, to announce his complete and total endorsement of Gary Higgins, a far-right Republican candidate running for a seat in Virginia's General Assembly today. While Trump has vocally backed Republican statewide candidates this year in Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi, this marks a rare foray for him into a 2019 state legislative race. All 100 seats in the Virginia's House of Delegates and all 40 seats in Virginia's State Senate will be decided today, Tuesday. Republicans held just a single-seat majority in both chambers over the past 2 years, and Democrats are hopeful that they could flip both chambers. If Democrats manage to win back control of the legislature, the policy ramifications could be huge, as GOP majorities have stymied legislation to protect LGBTQ people from discrimination, protect kids from gun violence, increase the minimum wage, ensure voting rights for all citizens, expanded reproductive choice, protect the climate, and guarantee equal rights for women. Well, obviously, the GOP can't have any of that. It is unclear why Trump decided to jump into the race for Virginia's 13th Senate District a day before the election. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the matter, and maybe it was because he's so tired of being booed at sporting events. Maybe he can go into a nest of thieves, a bunch of snakes, where they all just love him like he's a god. Ask Paula White. Higgins is hosting a rally with Trump defender and right-wing shock jock Mark Levin. Oh, how fun. Mark Levin knows. Trump lost in the 13th legislative district to Hillary back in 2016 by a 50-44 margin. The district has become more Democratic since, making Trump's decision to endorse Higgins especially curious. Well, I suppose if you're having foreign help from a hostile foreign power, you got to set the story right now, don't you? Because when it suddenly flips for this guy, it can be a sign to Trump's presence. Because ask Paula White, if you say no to Trump, you're saying no to God. So you better vote right, or else. Tarlo of Salon brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But before we get into Shira's article here, did you hear Stephen Miller is going to get married? Apparently he and Pence's, I believe, former spokesperson are going to be betrothed. Oh, well, It does speak to my heart. I really have to admit, because if someone like a Stephen Miller can find love, then maybe love isn't worth finding. Maybe. All right, let's get into this offering here. A federal appeals court has rejected Trump's effort to block New York prosecutors from obtaining his tax returns amid a claim of presidential immunity. A claim that is sure to set the stage for a showdown in the Supreme Court. And I would say, once again, I'm applying the trademark to "I told you so." Of course they're going to try to get it to the Supreme Court. That is their gambit. Well, Trump's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, vowed to appeal the case to the nation's highest court. The decision of the Second Circuit will be taken to the Supreme Court, Sekulow said in a statement. Usually he goes on Fox. The issue raised in this case goes to the heart of our republic. The constitutional issues are significant. Oh, you mean that a Republican president of the United States can hide all of his finances so that he's never going to divulge the fact that he has deep mob ties? And once his taxes are exposed, he exposes all those mobsters? And those mobsters don't like sunlight cast on them. And they get rid of the person who cast the sunlight on them or was the cause of it. That's why he's going through the extreme measures that he's going through. This guy is literally fighting for his life. In this reporter's opinion, of course, just to be clear, the three-judge panel wrote in their decision that any presidential immunity from state criminal process does not extend to investigative steps like the grand jury subpoena at issue here. Every other president has answered a subpoena. Jesus. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. recently obtained a grand jury subpoena for 8 years of Trump's personal and corporate taxes returns dating back to 2011. He is seeking documents from Trump's accounting firm, Mazars USA, as well as for the Trump Organization and other Trump-related business entities. Remember how they talked about how a philanthropic organization, a charity organization like the Clinton Global Initiative was so corrupt because they were handing out medicine and curing AIDS and diphtheria and et cetera, all across the world for poor people in what Trump called shithole countries? Remember that. And we're still confronted with, the Clinton Global Initiative, her organization is so corrupt. Projection be thy fellow's middle name. Vance's office has been investigating whether Trump or his company violated any New York state laws when they reimbursed Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, for payments Cohen made to two women who alleged extramarital affairs with Trump in the lead-up to the 2016 presidential election. Trump has denied having affairs with the women, and Cohen is currently serving a 3-year prison sentence after pleading guilty last year to multiple crimes, including breaking federal campaign finance laws related to the hush money payments. Trump sued Mazars last month in an attempt to prevent the firm from complying with subpoenas for his financial records. His lawyers have argued that Trump is immune from state prosecutions and that Vance does not need 8 years of Trump's tax returns in order to examine whether any laws were broken by the 2016 payments. They call the subpoena to Mazars a bad faith effort to harass the president by obtaining and exposing his private financial information, not a legitimate attempt to enforce New York law. They also claim that the investigation headed by Vance, a Democrat, was politically motivated. Really now, is that what you think? But federal district judge Victor Marrero tossed the lawsuit out, ruling in October that the immunity claim was repugnant to the nation's governmental structure and constitutional values. Repugnant! That's in the court record. Trump then appealed that decision to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Trump's lawyer there, William Consovoy, previously argued that his sitting president is immune from criminal prosecution in office, even if he were to shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue in New York. And last month, one of the three federal judges, Denny Chin, pressed Consovoy about the hypothetical shooting in the middle of Manhattan. Local authorities could not investigate. They could not do anything about it. Nothing could be done. That is your position, Chin asked. This is not a permanent immunity, Consovoy responded. We're talking about while in office. Could you imagine Trump going out on Fifth Avenue and executing someone like the sheriff of Saigon did? For those of you not old enough to remember that picture in Time and Life and Look magazine, because all three of them had it. But public executions was what the sheriff of Saigon was able to do because he is the authority. And apparently he was immune to prosecution until he wasn't. In Monday's ruling, the judges wrote, "This appeal does not require us to consider whether the president is immune from indictment or prosecution while in office, nor consider whether the president may lawfully be ordered to produce documents for use in a state criminal proceeding. We accordingly do not address those issues. The only question before us is whether a state may lawfully demand production by a third party of the president's personal financial records for use in a grand jury investigation while the president is in office. With the benefit of the district court's well-articulated opinion, we hold that any presidential immunity from state criminal process does not bar the enforcement of such a subpoena," they added. Now, the case is one of several surrounding Trump's finances, which is expected to reach the Supreme Court as soon as this term. Justices on the Supreme Court are not required to hear the case or to schedule at a party's request, but an appeal from a sitting president would likely attract their attention, especially if two of those are beholden to him. The last cases of the term are argued through the end of April, with decisions released in the final weeks of June. and cases heard in the following term would likely not be decided until after the 2020 presidential election. Earlier this month, the D.C. Court of Appeals ruled against Trump and refused to block a subpoena for his financial records from Mazars issued in April by the House Oversight Committee. Trump's attorneys could ask the full bench on the D.C. Circuit to rehear that appeal, or it could ask the Supreme Court to take up the case. Another Second Circuit panel is considering a case brought by Trump which challenges subpoenas issued by the House Intel and the House Financial Services Committees seeking his financial documents from Capital One and Deutsche Bank. The banks have said they do not have Trump's personal tax returns, but Deutsche Bank indicated that it possessed the tax returns of at least 2 individuals or businesses requested by lawmakers. Why only 2? Well, they've admitted to burning and destroying all of Trump's records. How has that happened? A federal district judge in Washington is considering a lawsuit filed in July by the House Ways and Means Committee against the Treasury Department and the IRS over their refusal to comply with a formal committee demand and subpoena for Trump's personal returns and returns filed by his businesses. No ruling has been issued in that case yet. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. Tardigrades are some of nature's toughest animals. Also known as water bears, the tiny creatures can withstand extreme conditions, like boiling hot temperatures, long periods of dehydration, and even oxygen deprivation.
One of the really cool things about tardigrades is that you can shoot them in outer space and they can survive the vacuum and radiation of low Earth orbit.
University of California San Diego biochemist Jim Kadonaga. Of course, he says tardigrades didn't evolve to endure the perils of space travel.
Many tardigrades live in environments that are both wet and dry, like moss. And when it's wet, they're active, and when it's dry, they can go into a desiccated state. That's something like a state of suspended animation.
Normally, dehydration would make tardigrade DNA susceptible to damage from chemicals called hydroxyl radicals, which form when water molecules split. They also form when DNA is exposed to radiation. But Kadonaga suspected that a protein found only in tardigrades, called DSEP, might protect their DNA under both conditions. DSEP stands for damage suppressor protein.
And the remarkable thing about this DSEP protein is that when you put it into human cells in the laboratory, it makes those cells more resistant to X-ray radiation.
Kadonaga's team, led by then undergraduate student Carolina Chavez, studied how DSEP protects DNA in cells. They found that it binds to chromatin, the compact structure that allows long molecules of DNA to ball up and fit into a tiny cell. The researchers think DSEP acts as a sort of chromatin insulator, shielding DNA from attack by hydroxyl radicals. They conclude that the protein is likely the key to the tardigrade's extreme hardiness in conditions that would prove lethal to most other organisms. The study appears in the journal eLife. Kadonaga says understanding the tardigrade's secret weapon may also inform biotechnology and pharmaceutical research.
And so now that we know how DSEP works, we might be able to use that knowledge to make designer versions of DSEP that can be used to potentially make cells more durable or longer lived.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Is the right to vote being gutted in America? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Let's begin by considering as an object lesson the recently announced voter purge in Georgia, where 300,000 names will be struck from the voter rolls, which is huge, 4% of all voters, in a state where the 2018 governor's race, Brian Kemp versus Stacey Abrams, was decided by 1.4%. The Georgia Secretary of State's office claims that this purging of the voter rolls is, quote, a routine process, but experience teaches that wholesale voter purges result in active voters being deleted, with the highest impact being on young people and communities of color. Taking a meat cleaver to an issue that requires a scalpel is wrong, and, as the advocacy group Fair Fight Action, founded by Stacey Abrams, asserts, voters should not be thrown off the rolls because they chose not to vote in 2 elections. The Supreme Court, 5-4, recently has given the green light to these state voter purges, as well as democracy-killing partisan gerrymandering, and the court has gutted the Voting Rights Act as well. In sum, powerful institutions, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches far too often are marching in lockstep to undermine the essential pillar of democracy, voting. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1855. That was the day that Eugene V. Debs was born in Terre Haute, Indiana. Debs was forced to leave school when he was just 14 years old. He worked as a railroad fireman. In 1875, Debs founded the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen. Early on, Debs was a Democrat. In 1884, he was elected to the Indiana State Assembly. However, Debs soon moved further left politically. He decided that union brotherhoods were ineffective because they divided workers who worked at different jobs in the same industry. He decided to organize a new kind of railroad workers union. In 1893, he became the president of the American Railway Union. This industrial union rose to national prominence due to its support of the Pullman workers' strike. Debs was jailed twice during the Pullman strike for defying a federal injunction ordering striking workers to return to work and for contempt of court. Debs spent 6 months in jail. While in prison, he read about socialism, and in 1900 and 1904, Debs was the Socialist Party's presidential nominee. Debs was also a founding member of the International Workers of the World, or Wobblies. When the United States entered World War I, Debs was an outspoken opponent of the war. He said, "They're continually talking about your patriotic duty. Their patriotic duty never takes them to the firing line or chucks them into the trenches." Debs was sent to a federal penitentiary for opposing the war. While in jail in 1920, he again ran for president and received nearly 1 million votes from behind bars. Debs was pardoned and released in 1921. After his second time in jail, his health took a turn for the worst. He returned to Terre Haute, where he died in 1926. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Monday, November 4th was unbelievably Donald Trump's 1,018th day in office. He lost an appeal to keep his taxes private, which he says he'll appeal to the Supreme Court. He was sued by an alleged rape victim, Jean Carroll, for defamation. One of the Giuliani associates signaled he's ready to cooperate with the inquiry. And the House released the first 2 of dozens of impeachment inquiry transcripts, those of Marie Yovanovitch, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and Michael McKinley, a former senior advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Donald Trump's newest rallying cry is, "Read the transcript." He's referring, of course, to the summary of his July 25th phone call with Ukraine's President Zelensky. He's even now selling shirts with those instructions emblazoned on them. Well, we already did, and you just confessed to extortion. But the directive to read the transcripts is now coming from us regarding the volumes of testimony given in the impeachment inquiry deposition so far, which are now being released every day. From the first batch, we learned that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been caught in a massive lie. In Michael McKinley's testimony, again, he's the former senior advisor to Pompeo, McKinley said that Pompeo helped Trump and Giuliani oust Marie Yovanovitch, the respected ambassador to Ukraine, and that he had urged Pompeo 3 times to defend her. But in an interview with George Stephanopoulos, Pompeo declared that he had never heard McKinley, quote, say a single thing about her ouster.
You know, from the time that Ambassador Yovanovitch departed Ukraine until the time that he came to tell me that he was departing, I never heard him say a single thing about his concerns with respect to the decision.
So you were never asked to put out...
Not once, George, did Ambassador McKinley say something to me during that entire time period.
2 more transcripts are set to be released Tuesday. What hidden gems will be uncovered with the next transcript release? Well, for once, let's do what Donald says.
Read the transcript.
Oh, we did, and we'll continue to do so. Now, if you think that's heavy reading, just wait. There's more. In response to Freedom of Information request battles with BuzzFeed News and CNN, the Justice Department released 500 pages of interview summaries, emails, and other documents related to the Mueller report. This is just the first dump of over 46,000 pages to be released monthly, in no particular order. The first batch includes interview reports and backup from 3 people: Rick Gates, Michael Cohen, and Steve Bannon. Jason Leopold, of course, did the legwork for BuzzFeed, and he's our first guest on Tuesday's Nicole Sandler Show, which airs at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific on the Progressive Voices Network. The free podcast will be available at NicoleSandler.com by 6 p.m. Eastern. Congress is out on recess again this week, but there's lots of action in D.C. anyway. Of course, the 3 committees working on the impeachment inquiry are still in session, although the 4 witnesses subpoenaed to testify on Monday all refused, citing the White House telling them not to appear. The courts are hearing a case to determine whether or not the administration's claims of executive privilege or constitutional immunity are valid. Well, Tuesday is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, meaning that it's Election Day, with key elections being held in Kentucky, Mississippi, New Jersey, and Virginia. Everyone is closely watching the results as a barometer of how the House impeachment is affecting races and for the status of Trump's sagging popularity in suburban areas. So, November 4th, 2019, was that off-in-the-distance date, according to the rules of the Paris Climate Accord, when a nation could begin the process of officially pulling out. Well, that day arrived Monday, and Donald Trump again embarrassed our nation and put another nail in the coffin of the planet when he officially moved to start the clock on leaving, putting the U.S. at odds with the entire rest of the world when it comes to committing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The full UN process of exiting the Paris deal can't be completed until a year from that withdrawal date. So that'll be November 4th, 2020, which happens to be one day after the 2020 presidential elections. Oh, and climate change will not be on the agenda at next year's G7 summit in the U.S. And in a related story, as wildfires continue burning California, Donald Trump took to Twitter to once again show his ignorance. He blamed California's governor, tweeting, "The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has done a terrible job of forest management. I told him from the first day we met that he must clean his forest floors, regardless of what his bosses, the environmentalists, demand of him. Must also do burns and cut fire stoppers." False. These fires are not in forests, but mostly suburban areas, triggered by electrical equipment, the Santa Ana winds, and the horribly dry conditions exacerbated by climate change. After a few more unfounded attacks, Trump tweeted that no more federal funds would be allocated to California to help fight the fires. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports, I invite you to check out The Nicole Sandler Show, which is heard Tuesday through Friday at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific, right here on the Progressive Voices Network. The podcast is always available, always free. We survive on your donations at NicoleSandler.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit. They said it was supposed to be in the mid-40s, and we went down below 40. How dare they? We are still under an active air stagnation advisory. So an inversion layer is holding all the smoke down low, and those with breathing problems are going to have some added problems. So do take care. Winds are light and variable out of the east-southeast. Temperatures should remain the same as yesterday, about 71 to 72. We got about that yesterday. Overnight lows, once again, are forecast in the mid-40s, probably a bit cooler than that. No forecast of rain in the near future, but we always hold out hope now, don't we? We should have plenty of sunshine, though mixed with a few clouds today, and some clouds tonight, and then plentiful sunshine tomorrow. Forecast as plentiful. Ragweed pollen is low. That air quality index is moderate at 51 parts per million. Air stagnation, it could get worse. And that daytime UV index is low, a seasonal low of 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.12 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 76%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 54 and partly cloudy. Paris is 54 and partly cloudy. Rome is 68, mostly cloudy, with an electrical storm and thunderclap warning. That could knock out their electric grid. It often does that. But it's weird having it in November. Weird. Kiev is 56 and fair. Kabul is 55 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and fair. Tokyo is 55 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 56 and clear. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit with cloudy conditions in the fall. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anna Mahler-Paperney of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United States is unsafe for would-be refugees, and a Canada-U.S. agreement that compels asylum seekers to first apply for U.S. sanctuary ought to be ripped up. Lawyers for refugees and rights groups argued in a Canadian federal court. Under the Safe Third Country Agreement, asylum seekers at a formal Canada-U.S. border crossing traveling in either direction are turned back and told to apply for asylum in the country they first arrived in. Lawyers for unnamed refugees who had been turned away are challenging the agreement, saying the United States does not qualify as a safe country. Under Donald Trump, human rights groups, including Amnesty International and the Canadian Council for Refugees, have also joined the case, which could change the way the two countries cooperate on refugee status.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
David Lundgren and Steve Scherer of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Elizabeth May, the head of Canada's Minority Greens, said yesterday, Monday, she was quitting to spend more time with her family just 2 weeks after an election in which her party won fewer seats than it had targeted. May, age 65, has headed the party since August of 26, and the Greens won 3 of the 338 seats in the House of Commons, one more than they held before the October 21st election, but fewer than the 8 to 10 May had targeted. The result left the party on the margins of politics, with little chance of influencing Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's minority government. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we are going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.